So thank you for the opportunity to chat on this today. I certainly appreciate it. And I want to be really clear, and I want to open by saying absolutely Choices for Youth does important work. And I've always been pleased to work with them and with the team, and I certainly look forward to continuing that. But I want to also be transparent, as transparent as I can, without going into the nuances on the funding. So there's 2 points that I'd like to make for clarity. And the first one is that this was not a clawback or a cut to funding. Choices for Youth received the maximum amount of funding available under the 2024 program that they applied for, the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy. It's called the YES program. And the government has been a strong supporter, the Liberal government has been a strong supporter of Choices for Youth with millions of dollars in funding. And I certainly look forward to continuing to work with the Choices under a range of available funding programs. The second point is the core operational funding or the housing funding is not covered under the program that they applied for. So the YES funds the opportunity that provides an opportunity for youth under skills experience and to really help youth find good quality jobs. And the implication that cuts for Choices of Youth operation or housing program are the results of this funding is quite simply misleading.
So are you arguing, Joanne, that Choices for Youth are misleading the public with their information? Because Jen Crow would argue and has argued that they spoke to Minister Ian's office. They've had dialogues with Minister Ian. She, of course, is the minister responsible for the funding here. They were led to believe that a funding envelope of $20 million involving different programs, I assume, would likely be forthcoming, and we're making choices around all of that, and that hasn't come to the fore. So now they find themselves in the circumstances that they're in. Are they not telling us the truth? Is that what you're arguing?
I don't want to say who's saying the truth. What I'm simply saying to you is in 2020, Choices for Youth received funding under the YES program for, I believe it was $16 million, and that went from 2020 to 2024. When that program funding finished, it finished, right? Because that's the way federal funding works. It's not roll over multiple years. It's the term of the contract. So the new program, the one that opened in 2024, Choices received $4 million under this program, which, if you look at the numbers across the country, it's at the high end. That the program is specific to youth employment and skill strategy. It is specific to helping youth gain workforce skills. That's the intent, and I think that's very important to outline that this was a specific program, how the navigation through a system in terms of applying for a program and through, it's very consistent. I'm not saying what somebody said is or is not the case for them. What I'm saying is this is how the programs roll out. And the other thing I just want to quickly say, Tim, is that in this process of applying for grants, there is no guarantee that funding will continue from one cycle to another. And also, you can't guarantee you will get that, be successful in that program application until you receive formal acceptance.
And I can attest to that, Joanne, having worked on many of these programs, I understand that, but I think Jen Crow and the people at Choices for Youth felt that the guidance they were getting from the minister's office was such that they were on the right track. All of that aside, you've done a lot of good work in the community yourself. You come from a place of helping people in the community. You know how difficult it is to get funds to help people. You're making the point about the way the government views how the funding was directed to Choices for Youth. But I think the average person listening to this is saying, okay, I don't want to get into a he said, she said about what funding envelope works and didn't work. What they're concerned about are the people who've been laid off, some of the numbers that I read, the number of children and kids, young people that now won't have options they had before because of the funding circumstance that exists. Is the federal government looking to resolve this problem?
So interesting, a lot in there. So I'm just going to go back to what I said before, and I'm saying this because I was in the community, and I know how important it is when you're running a not-for-profit. I mean, I get it, and I have to thank the people in Newfoundland and Labrador because they kept the doors open. Diversification is critical. What I want. I think the 2 points that I really would like to leave with the listeners is one is the federal government does not provide core funding. That's the province. And the housing funding, that sits with the province. Many times, as you well know, it's federal funding, but it goes to the province, and the province is responsible for how the funds are allocated. The federal government, with specific program funding, is a start and an end date. Whether an organization, and I mean this across the board, any organization, whether they use the opportunity to build capacity when they're in that funding cycle, in this case 4 years, is entirely up to that organization. But there is a start and an end point. And, and a final thing, I said 2 points, but I'll throw a third in. I think it's nobody really wants to see any of this go back and forth. I don't think that's helpful. I personally just really want to focus on solutions. The federal government is continuing to support Choices for Youth across multiple departments. They do fabulous work, but it's work across a continuum of supports in young people's lives. This was one of many supports. And so many of the other funding streams are open, and funding streams will continue to be open. And I think that's really, for me, the most important point here.
All right, let me ask this as a last question, building off what you just said. So do you envision that through those other funding streams, $16 million or whatever it may be over a 4-year period can be found to help address the problem that the shortfall that exists as Choices for Youth sees it now?
What I will say to you is, that is a lot of money, and that's a lot of money in any government program. Again, as you well know, there are occasions when funds of that very significant amount become available, but it's not very common. I don't want to get into how Choices for Youth should set up their own financial structures or run the programs going forward. I think it's really important to separate a core funding stream from a very specific grant program. It's still $4 million that we're talking about. And that's a lot of money for a very specific program, which is youth skill training. And I think it's also important to note, and I commend Choices for Youth for this, they run phenomenal social enterprises. They have impact construction. They have the pizza takeaway, fabulous. I go there. They have boutique. They have bakeries. They have really strong programs. That's also part of a suite of supports that they've been able to build capacity in-house, but also initially were supported in many cases by government. So I don't think this is just one-off. I think that and I know it's very difficult at the moment for Choices, and certainly always there to continue to speak to them about this as I have in the past. But it's important to note that there was a 4-year program that was very strong, right? $16 million. That was a lot of money. Ended in 2024. The new stream, which they've received $4 million from, is a new stream. And frankly, no one in the country got anywhere near $20 million. So Choices for Youth have not been picked in this round as saying, you're no longer here. They've really done well by this stream.
All right, I have to leave it there, Joanne. I do respect the fact that you came on to speak to this, as I suspect you know. This is not going to go away, and we'll keep talking about it. Thank you for making the time today. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.